So fellas, UFC 309 just went down. Jon Jones just finished Stipe Miocic in the third round to claim the undisputed belt, to keep the undisputed belt. We're going to be doing a full card breakdown. Obviously, I'll get to the main event at the end, but we'll start off with the first fight on the card with Veronica Hardy versus Eduarda Moura. Eduarda Moura wins this one by decision. Bit of an uneventful fight, to be fair. Veronica Hardy does absolutely nothing on the feet. Moura manages to take her down in the second and is landing the better shots on the feet. Moura's boring, but she's pretty difficult to beat. She's a hard hitter, pretty solid grappler as well. Veronica Hardy disappointed though. Like I've always been saying, she's a really good unranked flyweight in the, women's flyweight. And she just disappointed in this fight with Dan Hardy in a corner. I think it's kind of overrated. She couldn't really get going with her striking. It was just all feints, no output. And she ended up getting taken down, controlled, and she just weren't really landing anything significant on the feet apart from leg kicks, which she only really started to turn up in the third round. So Eduarda Moura by decision against Veronica Hardy. Then we had Oban Elliot versus Bassil Hafez. Good win by Oban Elliot. I was kind of calling him a bit of a decision machine coming into this fight. He ended up getting the knockout in the third round against Bassil Hafez, which I kind of thought was on its way because Bassil Hafez, his striking defense isn't there. He's quite dangerous and he is quite a powerhouse, but his striking defense isn't there. Oban Elliot clips him with a big, I think it was a right hand in the third round, knocks him out, which I didn't really expect from Oban Elliot. My takeaway from this fight is that Oban Elliot's a problem. You know, he's very well rounded as well. He's got grappling, which he showed in his first two fights against Preston Parsons and Val Woodburn. And in this fight, there was barely any grappling. It was just pure stand-up from Oban Elliot. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that he's like the next big prospect or the Bo Nickal of the welterweight division, but he is a problem for these up-and-coming guys. Like I said, I am surprised he got a finish, though. Like, I think the last time he got a finish was like 6 fights ago. Even in Cage Warriors, towards the end of his career, he was getting decisions. But he does need to work on his promo skills. This dude's promo, he can't cut a promo to save his life. He's on the mic, he's got this squeaky Welsh accent. In my opinion, if this dude wants to become a star, he needs to get a more entertaining style. Needs to work on some promo skills. But nah, he's what, 3-0 in the UFC now? Just got a good knockout over Bassil Hafez. That's going to raise his stock massively. I say we put him on the UFC London card in March on the fight night. Put him on the main card, maybe as the main card opener. Hafez, he's a low-level fighter. He had a good performance against Jack Della Maddalena, and that's all he's really had. Like, you lost a close fight to JDM, and then you beat Mcghee Gall, which you probably should have finished him, especially after how he looked tonight, which we'll get onto. And now you've just been knocked out by Oban Elliot, who hasn't finished anyone since 2022. So I'm not going to straight up say he should be cut from the UFC, because like I said, that JDM performance was impressive, and he did beat Mcghee Gall in his last fight, but he is a low-level fighter. I mean, barely any head movement from him at all. The fight IQ was dodgy, didn't shoot a single takedown in that fight. Good win for Oban Elliot, back in the winning, well, I say back in the winning column as if he's not on a winning streak, but yeah, I'd like to see him against somebody like Morono next. I will do a matchmaking video tomorrow, but yeah, good win for Oban Elliot. Then we had Mcghee Gall versus Ramiz Brahimaj. Brahimaj knocks him out in the first round. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a matter of time before he was going to land that big right hand, because he was kind of clipping him every now and then. Mcghee Gall was kind of just backing up, landing nothing significant, and then eventually he puts Mcghee Gall to sleep. Brutal knockout, actually. You know, his legs bent back and everything. Fully put Mcghee Gall to sleep. Yeah, Mcghee Gall is washed. It kind of surprised me that he's only 32 years old. I checked obviously the research before this fight, and I was expecting Mcghee Gall to be like late 30s because of how long he's been in the UFC. This dude's only 32 years old, but he is washed. I feel like he's not even like a veteran or anything like that. The only reason this dude's a big name is because he beat CM Punk. If it wasn't for the CM Punk fight, he wouldn't be a big name. He's lost like 5 out of his last 6. I think we cut him from the UFC, or he's probably done with MMA now. Brahimaj has solid boxing though. He has got pretty good boxing, works with Bilal Muhammad and a pretty good team. Still has a lot of work to do. I'm pretty sure he's got a record of like 11-5, so if he had lost this fight to Mcghee Gall, probably would have been cut from the UFC. And again, it isn't like he beat some super high level opponent. He beat Mcghee Gall, but it was a good fight, good boxing. We knew we had good boxing coming into this fight, and it's not only his boxing, he's got good jiu-jitsu as well. He's got quite a few submissions. So Brahimaj, good win for him, knocked out Mcghee Gall, and I think it's time we just let Mcghee Gall free and just, I don't want to say, yeah, just cut him from the UFC. He's not really needed anymore. Marcin Tybura versus Diniz. Now, I predicted Marcin Tybura to win. I feel like this was a kind of a pick 'em fight. A lot of people were picking Diniz, a lot of people were picking Tybura. I picked Tybura to win this one by, I think it was decision, and he got a brutal TKO in the second round. Yeah, I mean, he just kind of took Diniz down in that second round, then absolutely rained down ground and pound, cut him open, and then eventually he was wobbling all over the place. He had about 15 cuts on his face, and the referee decided that was enough. You ain't fighting no more. He started protesting, but I don't really blame him for stopping the fight, because 10 seconds more and he would have got finished in that second round. Tybura is just good. I said this coming into the fight, and I'm going to say it again. He is not great anywhere, but he's not bad anywhere. He can strike, he can grapple, he's not got terrible stamina, he's got a decent chin, but he's just not elite anywhere. He's the perfect example of a veteran. He isn't going to ever make it into the top 5. He's never going to be an elite guy, but he's always going to do enough to keep himself in the top 10 and keep himself in the rankings. In terms of Diniz, He's dangerous. I mean, he was. I think he dropped Tybura in that first round. I thought he was nearly over. He's very dangerous on the feet. Comes from Glory Kickboxing, but this dude just massively lacks grappling. I mean, he got taken down by Austin Lane. Now he's been taken down by Marcin Tybura. So we just need to work on his grappling. Maybe getting a bit. Maybe improve his shape as well. Good stoppage though. I know a lot of people were protesting the stoppage because it was a doctor stoppage, but I don't blame him. Like, I was very surprised that he was still protesting after that second round where he got nearly killed with the ground and pound from Marcin Tybura. Got cut open, was wobbling all over the place. Good win for Marcin Tybura. Maybe we can see him fight somebody like Derek Lewis in a rematch. And in terms of Diniz, just let him build himself up. I mean, this was a big step up for Diniz as well. You got to remember, I'm pretty sure he's only had like 2 wins in the UFC against fairly low-level fighters, and now you put him in against a top 10 fighter. So I think we'll let him build himself up outside the rankings. Then we had David Onama versus Roberto Romero. Short notice fight. David Onama wins by decision. This was a really good fight. This was, if they're going to give a fight of the night to anyone, I would recommend giving it to David Onama. Really good, well, both of these guys, to be fair. Really good performance and a really good debut by Romero as well. It was just an absolute back-and-forth banger. David Onama nearly got finished in the first round. Roberto Romero nearly got finished in the first round. They were both kind of trading back and forth. And then when it kind of got outside the first round into the second and the third round, that's where David Onama did his best work. But Roberto Romero should stay in the UFC. Even though he did just lose, he's still UFC talent. He was kind of piecing up David Onama in that first round. So I think he's definitely UFC talent. I definitely think he deserves to stay in this 155 or whatever division he wants to stay at, 145, 155. But he does look UFC worthy. And for having a performance like that, you can't really cut him from the UFC. In terms of David Onama, this dude's a name to look out for. He's got a couple of good wins. Beat Jonathan Pierce. Now he's just gone out there and had a fight of the night with Roberto Romero. He's on a bit of a winning streak now. Also, he's David Onama. I think he's a name to look out for. Again, I'm not going to call him a massive prospect. He has lost twice in the UFC, but he's fairly talented. He can grapple. He can strike. He's tough. He's fun to watch. So David Onama's a name to look out for, and this was on short notice from him as well. It wasn't like he had a full training camp for Roberto Romero as well. So I think they should both stay in the UFC. Both should get fight of the night. Really good performance from David Onama. The next fight, we had Jim Miller versus Damon Jackson. Jim Miller gets the submission in the first round. How many submissions or how many finishes has Jim Miller had recently? I think he's had like 2. I think he's had like 5 or 4 finishes in his last 6 fights. Obviously came off that brutal loss to Bobby Green, and then he just submitted Damon Jackson in the first round. Damon Jackson's retired. Jim Miller's still elite. Okay, when I say elite, I'm not saying he's like a top lightweight in the world. Obviously, I'm not saying he's ranked, but to say that this dude's 42 years old or in his 40s, and he's still beating these guys. Like, I know it's only Damon Jackson that he beat, but even before Damon Jackson, he was having good performances. This dude's longevity needs to be studied. This dude has been around since like before UFC 100, and he's still getting finishes to this day. The last time this dude won a fight, and it wasn't by finish, I believe was all the way back in like 2016 or 2017. He's still got more left. Yes, he's old. Yes, he's out of his prime, but he isn't washed, is Jim Miller, in my opinion. I don't think he's washed. I think he's got a lot more to offer. If we keep giving these guys, keep giving Jim Miller these unranked lightweights, I'm not talking like the killers of the lightweight division like Rumbetsky, but if we just give him a couple of fun names in the unranked section of the lightweight division, I don't mind seeing Jim Miller stick around a bit longer. He's got no reason to retire. He's not looking terrible. He's not looking washed. He's coming off these, good wins, and yeah, he's just good when you see a veteran win, because I feel like veterans in the UFC, I mean, especially in the main event of this card, they've kind of got like a reputation for getting destroyed. But Jim Miller went out there, got a finish in the first round against Damon Jackson. Good win for Jim Miller. Good to have him back in the winning column. Then we had the featured prelim with Marcus Mcghee and Jonathan Martinez. Marcus Mcghee did enough to get the decision win. I thought he deserved to get the decision win. My only problem was that Martinez has frustratingly bad fight IQ. This dude is one of the best leg kickers in the UFC. He finished Cub Swanson and Adrian Yanez with leg kicks. He's definitely one of the best leg kickers in the UFC. And in that third round, a couple of more leg kicks and he could have potentially stopped the fight. And the dude decides to clinch for like a minute and a half for no reason. He nearly has Marcus Mcghee finished because of the leg kicks. Then he goes for a clinch for no reason when Marcus Mcgee's the grappler. And then even after that, he only shoots like 2 leg kicks for the entirety of the fight. His fight IQ is terrible. It was a very technical fight, to be fair. Martinez might be the best leg kicker in the UFC, like I said, but it was a good win for Marcus Mcghee. Went out there. I didn't really expect him to be the more technical guy against Jonathan Martinez, and he was, so that's good for him. Give him a ranked fighter next. He's going to be ranked come Tuesday, so good win for Marcus Mcghee. Good prospect as well, and I think he's going to be, I genuinely think he's going to be like a good prospect for the bantamweight division, because he's powerful, he's dangerous, he's well-rounded, and now he's just taken Jonathan Martinez, who's a very technical guy, to a decision. So Marcus Mcghee, I want to see him in the bantamweight division. Fun guy to watch. And for Jonathan Martinez, he's going to have to be kicked out of the rankings. 2 losses in a row. Fight IQ wasn't great. Didn't look amazing. So yeah, I guess Jonathan Martinez kick him out of the rankings, bring in Marcus Mcghee. Then we had the main card, Mauricio Ruffy versus James Llyontop. Mauricio Ruffy got a decision win, which in my opinion was surprising. Now, obviously, I expected Mauricio Ruffy to win, and he did piece him up. But I expected him to get an early finish in this fight. He took him the whole 3 rounds, and I'm not going to sit here and say that he's not a prospect. He's so crafty, and he was absolutely piecing up James Llyontop. He had a massive gouge under his eye. He was just basically piecing him up for 3 rounds straight. Well, I say 2 rounds straight because he kind of lost that 3rd round. But he did look beatable. He did look beatable, in my opinion. He called out Benoit Saint Denis. In my opinion, you can't go and fight Benoit Saint Denis. BSD's ranked. You've had 2 wins in the UFC, one of them being against James Llyontop, a guy who's 0-2, and you beat him by decision. You've got to build yourself up, in my opinion. I don't think he deserves an immediate ranked fighter. And Llyontop's stock increased after this performance, in my opinion. I was always thinking that if James was to lose this fight, which was pretty much inevitable, he was probably going to be cut from the UFC because he's already 0-2 going into this fight. Now he's 0-3. But after that performance, how tough he was, and the fact that he actually won the 3rd round, in my opinion, against Ruffy, and it at least came close to it, I think we keep him in the UFC for one last performance. Ruffy, he's definitely got a lot of potential. Good prospect in the lightweight division. Beatable. I'm not going to sit here and say that he's unbeatable, but I just expected, I don't know, I'm not trying to take away from his performance, but I did expect a little bit more. I thought this was going to be like the Val Woodburn versus Bo Nickal of Mauricio Ruffy's career, where he kind of just goes out there and gets a quick finish, but credit to James's toughness, was able to survive the entire fight. Ruffy's still fun to see, can't wait to see what he does next. I think we give him maybe somebody like Elvis Brenner or one of the kind of better unranked lightweights before we give him a ranked fighter, but good performance, good prospect in the lightweight division from the Fighting Nerds, and I do think we should keep James Llyontop in the UFC for at least one more chance before we immediately cut him. And then we had Araujo versus Silva. I'm going to be honest, I didn't watch this fight. He was kind of just on in the background, didn't really pay attention too much to this fight. Araujo got the win. Kareem Silva looked terrible, was kind of pulling guard like Kron Gracie the entire fight, so good win for Araujo. Then we had the featured fight of the night that, in my opinion, kind of disappointed. I expected Bo Nickal to go out there and do whatever he wanted to Paul Craig, and he won a decision. Bo Nickal got a decision win. It wasn't even like a super dominant decision. He kept saying in the post-fight octagon interview that he whooped him for 3 rounds. He edged every round. He got a 10-9 every round, and it wasn't even super dominant. Never really had Paul Craig rocked either, which is kind of crazy considering he's one of the worst middleweight strikers out there. Good win for Bo Nickal. Probably going to get a ranked fighter next. My first takeaway from this fight was that Paul Craig's striking, it did look improved. Now, I know he's kind of got a very basic striking. It's kind of just body kicks and leg kicks, and that's kind of all he does. But it did look improved. He seemed to have much better output in this fight, and he seemed to be having success in the striking. Granted, he was fighting Bo Nickal, but the inevitable was that he was going to lose. I did say that there's barely any chance Paul Craig won this fight. I'm surprised Paul Craig never tried taking it to the ground, though. In that 3rd round, at least in the 2nd half, you'd think that Paul Craig would have tried initiating the clinch and pulling guard just to try and get a submission. I know he's facing Bo Nickal, who's probably one of the best wrestlers in the middleweight division, but you could have at least tried something considering that jiu-jitsu is his bread and butter, and he was losing that fight. Bo is talented, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to sit here and say that he's not talented. He is talented. He's got amazing wrestling, and he's striking as, well, I mean, he's not got elite striking. He's kind of just got an overhand right, but he is talented, but he's not top contender material yet. He said he could beat Khamzat Chimaev. Chimaev would sleep him on the feet. I think we do give him a ranked fighter. I think we do give him that opportunity now. He's had 4 wins in the UFC, a couple of finishes too. He's very talented. He's a good prospect, but nowhere near top contender material yet. I think we give him somebody in the top 15 of the middleweight division to test how good he is. But again, this was stylistically a difficult fight for Bo Nickal, who's facing a guy with some of the most dangerous jiu-jitsu in the UFC, so you can't blame Bo Nickal for not doing his speciality and wrestling with him. So good win for Bo Nickal. If you want to give him an easy fight, just give him a Shell Pereira. That easily takes him to the rankings. I'm thinking maybe somebody like Jack Hermansson could be a good test for Bo Nickal to see how good he really is and if he deserves to get into the top 10, but wasn't a super entertaining fight. They both got booed. I don't blame them. There wasn't really much. It was kind of just Paul Craig launching body kicks and Bo Nickal throwing an overhand right, and it connected every couple of minutes, so that's all there really was to the fight. Bo Nickal got the win, back in the winning column. Then we had the co-main event between Charles Oliveira and Michael Chandler. Really good fight, but this fight, it seemed like it wasn't as much as a, how do I say, it wasn't like a back and forth banger like it was the first time around, but it was much higher level and much more technical while still being a good fight. So I'm not saying it was a bad fight by any means. It was still a really good fight, but it was way more high level. Charles Oliveira won a decision, nearly got finished in that 5th round, and I'm going to talk about Michael Chandler's 5th round in a second. My takeaways, Oliveira's evolving. Oliveira's never really had wrestling. If you look at all of Oliveira's submissions, he kind of relies on knocking people down and then pouncing on them to get the submission, or kind of getting knocked down and then pulling people into capitalizing when people, obviously go for the finish. But he's never really had wrestling. In this fight, he was out wrestling Michael Chandler. Not even that, he was beating him on the feet as well. I know that 5th round, which I'm going to mention in a second, there was a bit of controversy, but No, he was beating him on the feet. There was a couple of times where he rocked. He made Michael Chandler sprint, and he kind of just dominated Michael Chandler with the wrestling. Took him down, stayed on his back for the majority of the fight, threatened a couple of submissions, beat him with ground and pound, launched some dominant elbows, and rocked him on the feet. It was a very dominant performance, very mix of grappling and striking kind of game plan from Oliveira, and it worked. Michael Chandler did get dominated the entire fight, but he did have a BMF 5th round. I mean, he was literally a second away from finishing Charles Oliveira. He is a super dirty fighter, though. He's always had this reputation for being a dirty fighter, and now to have that many back of the head shots in a row, he's kind of dirty from Michael Chandler. Seconds off finishing him, and then eventually he does the same thing he did in the first fight. When Oliveira's on him like a backpack, he jumps on his back, did it twice. Good way to end the 5th round. And I do think I don't mind the idea of Chandler fighting for the BMF against Max Holloway. He's just not undisputed title worthy. I mean, what's his record now? 2-4 in the UFC. So he's never going to fight for an undisputed belt, in my opinion, is Michael Chandler. He's just not consistent enough. But despite losing, he's always going to be a top lightweight, in my opinion. Like, you can't just look at his record and see that he's losing to these top guys and assume that he can't stay at the top. I'd love to see him versus Max Holloway. I'd love to see him versus McGregor, even though that's probably never going to happen. But it was a good fight. Give Charles Oliveira a title. Give Michael Chandler a fun fight. But yeah, I'm really impressed by Oliveira. He seemed to be evolving, and I'm excited to see how he would do in a rematch with Makhachev. Obviously, I'm still going to pick Makhachev to win, but because he's improved his wrestling, like, he's definitely been working on his wrestling as Oliveira. His striking looked sharp. Good win for Charles Oliveira. And then we had the main event. Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic. Jon Jones, spinning body kick in that 3rd round, dropped Stipe Miocic and eventually went for a ground and pound finish and got the finish. He looked better than he did against Cyril Gane, I will say that, and as an Aspinall fan, I will say Jon Jones is by far the biggest threat to Tom Aspinall in this division, by far. But my main takeaways from the fight, first and foremost, Stipe was not fit to fight for a belt. He was not fit to fight for a belt. He looked extremely slow, and I'm not just trying to sit here and make excuses. Stipe did not look like champion caliber opponent. His striking was super slow. He had absolutely nothing going with the kicks. It was just kind of circle the octagon, take a beating, and then every now and then run in with a couple of punches in bunches and, you know, hope that one lands and knocks Jones out. That was Stipe's entire game plan. He shouldn't be fighting anymore. Put him out of his misery, and that was what we were all saying to Dana. You know, Stipe's not fit to fight for a belt anymore. He put the title fight on anyway, but Stipe looked trash. Jon Jones, he did Jon Jones things, just pieced up Stipe Miocic for the majority of the fight. I thought he was going to get a finish in that 1st round where he got that nice takedown and then battered him with elbows. But he needs to fight Tom Aspinall, because as good as Jones looked, and he is definitely the greatest of all time, you did it against Stipe Miocic. We said it before the fight, and I'm going to say it after the fight. As good as you looked, you did it against Stipe, who's nowhere near fit to fight for a belt. Yes, he's the greatest heavyweight of all time, but that's like saying Anderson Silva should come back and fight Dricus du Plessis because he's the greatest. That's not how it works. He might be the greatest, he definitely at the best. He got called out in the Octagon interview, you know, Joe Rogan doing as he normally does, glazing Alex Pereira, saying that, you know, do you want to fight Porton or do you want to fight Aspinall? He said he's going to try and work things out with Hunter and Dana, and he is going to fight again, but he didn't mention any names. I think that's him kind of trying to say he will fight Aspinall, but only if he gets an absolutely massive paycheck for it, which, I mean, I don't really care how much Jones gets paid as long as we get to see him against Tom Aspinall. But it was a good win. As an Aspinall fan, I am a little bit more concerned because Jones, again, I know he's fighting Stipe, but he did look very good in that fight, and it is Jon Jones, but with some of the shots that Stipe was landing, if Aspinall could do that to Jones, I don't know if Jones takes it as well, and I don't know if Jones is going to be able to remain conscious. But good win for Jon Jones. Greatest of all time. He's defended his belt in 2 different divisions, so respect to Jones. Good performance, and Stipe, yeah, he's got to pack it in. I mean, he was never fit to fight for a belt in the first place. But that is my UFC 309 takeaway. I think it was a pretty good card. There was a couple of good finishes on the prelims. I think the main card kind of died down a little bit. The main event was good despite it being Jones and Stipe fighting for the belt. Let me know your thoughts on this card and Jon Jones getting a win. I will do a matchmaking video tomorrow. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you for watching.